You want to click? Yay! Welcome everyone to our new series of Wednesday webinars. Thank you so much to everybody that's here today. If you're a first timer attendee to one of these webinars, you know that you are free to type in your questions for our panelists. We have such an amazing session today. Please feel free to, enter your comments, your questions in the chat. We want this to be as interactive as possible. We Today's run of the show is we'll have a sort of conversation with our panelists for an hour, and then we're gonna break you guys out into groups so that you can conversate with them one-on-one and continue asking those questions and prepare yourselves for your annual reviews that I know are coming in January. So again, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Barbara Mujica, and I'm the executive of NELCUP, and I'm so happy to be here with Kenia Calderon Cerrón, Elisa Hoffman, George Guerrero, and Andrea Smith, who are going to be leading the conversation today. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and ask the first question. This question is directed to Kenia and George or Jorge. Do you want me to call you George or Jorge?
Whatever works for you.
Yes, okay. Why are annual reviews such an important part of professional growth, and how can employees shift their mindset to see them as opportunities rather than evaluations?
I love that question, Kenya. I don't know if you want to go before me or if
Take
you're
it
ready.
away. Yeah, take it away, George.
All
Yeah.
right, let's go ahead and get this started. So from my take, I think performance reviews they matter because they create intentional pause points, right? In a time period where it's just full of routine and heavy workloads, we rarely take a step back to examine, what have you learned? Where did I stretch out as an employee, as a contributor? And also, where am I holding myself back? So I think a review is less about judgment and more about alignment, right? Trying to align your goals with the organization's direction. It's making sure that your work is seen, that it's understood and appreciated, right? Everyone wants to feel appreciated. Um, I think when employees see reviews as a chance to advocate for themselves, and to realign expectations, and they're looking to get clarity in their next steps, it creates an entirely different conversation between them and their appraiser, or maybe even their team. And that's, I guess, one of the big takeaways is that you want to create that mindset shift if you're not already there. And you reframe this from this is about what I did wrong or what I did right. This becomes more of a strategic conversation about your personal trajectory, and how to make the next year even better, right? If you're not positioned right now where you want to be. So all in all, I think it's one of the few structured opportunities where the focus is going to be squarely on you as an employee, as a contributor. And that's really valuable if you use that time properly. So that's my 2 cents.
Oh, I love the response. Thank you. Kenya.
Yes, I would say in addition to what George just mentioned, um, so I always go back to how are we as Latinos in the workplace? And I know that Latinos in the credit union movement work so hard, especially because we have that dual capability to help folks in different languages, right? So I know that you're working hard, but do not make an assumption that your managers or the upper management know that you're working hard. And so I think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice that just because you're helping twice as many members, that people will know that. And so from a manager standpoint, sometimes managers are really busy just on their own responsibilities. And they're hyper focused on delivering their workload. And so do not make the assumption that they know when you've gone above and beyond to improve the member experience or when you've gone above and beyond to grow membership. And that's why performance reviews and annual reviews are so important because that is an opportunity to ensure that you have documented and that you have shared with somebody the times that you have benefited the credit union beyond what other people have may have noticed. And so for me is allowing us as an opportunity to say out loud the work that we've been doing in the year and leave that assumption that people know how hard you've been working without you actually saying it to them or documenting it.
Mm. I love the perspective that you're bringing, Kenya, from a managerial perspective, because yes, a lot of times we're boggled up with our own doings that we forget, sometimes what our staff may be doing and the things that they've done to go
Exactly.
out of their way. So thank you for that. The second question is for Miss Alisa and Miss Andrea. From your experience, what are some common mistakes professionals make when preparing for their annual reviews, and how can they avoid them? Alisa, I'll let you take it away and then we'll pass it over to Andrea.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I love this question because I really do see these patterns every single year. The first, mistake or opportunity for growth I see folks make is treating their annual review kind of like a pop quiz instead of a storytelling moment. And when you go into something trying to remember 12 months worth of work from memory, it's kind of like trying to write a memoir using only your brain's camera roll. So things will be missing. Um, and another mistake, kind of going off of Kenya's perspective as well, which is especially common for women, first gen professionals, brown, indigenous, people of color professionals, is downplaying your own brilliance. A lot of the times, the way that we're raised, it's kind of like, oh, just put your head down and work and be humble, sé humilde, no seas, no seas arrogant, don't be arrogant, don't be, all of these things. So a lot of the times it almost comes natural to us to say, oh, it was nothing, or it was a team effort, which is might be true and wonderful, but it also erases your individual impact. And trust me, in the professional corporate world, the people who get promoted are rarely the ones being humble. And that's just the unfortunate truth. And it's one of the barriers that we are faced with, but we can be stronger than.
Mhm. I love that. Maybe down the road we'll explore how can people merge their culture with being an advocate, because I think that's a struggle that a lot of Latinos have. It's like culturally we're taught to be humble, but how can we be both, without leaving our roots behind? So, Andrea, any insights to this?
Yeah, absolutely. I can absolutely agree with what Alicia said. And I honestly am my biggest advocate and person that has relied on my memory to try to go through what I've done through the year. But now I maintain a log. So I think
Mm,
whether that's quarterly, especially at Salau, we use a platform called Standout, so it helps me quarterly figure out what were my wins, what were my challenges for that quarter, and then at the end of the year, you have that kind of log to go back to. And if your company or organization doesn't have something like that, then I would suggest maybe doing your own quarterly wins and impact log. So, where you track measurable outcomes, lessons learned, examples. Maybe if you had challenges for the quarter, if there was a big project or something that just didn't turn out the way you hoped, marking that as well and bringing that up, I think is really key. And then just remember, like when you reflect back on your work for the quarter or the year, like some prompts or reflections that kind of help me are, what part of your work this year or this quarter were you most proud of? Like what shined the most to you? How does your impact show up in the organization and in the mission? Like, are you helping drive the organization's mission? And between now and your next review, maybe track one success story every month. Maybe it's helping a member, or maybe, we have Salal stories where most of our member team within the branch have spotlights where they've really helped members. So make sure you just highlight those things. They're really important when it comes to review time.
I like the log idea because that's a great way to not forget what you've been
Mhm.
doing month by month. And that ties into the next question for Elisa and George. What's the best way to document accomplishment throughout the year so you're ready to showcase the impact that you've made during your review session? And George, I'll let you go and then we'll pass it over to Alicia.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, I mean, I think Alisa and Andrea made some really good points, right? So the question is, what's the best way to document your accomplishments? I think the idea of a living tool is probably one of the best tools that you're going to have at your disposal. You decide whether that's going to be, an email, a live email that you're drafting, or a live Word document, even, something as simple as a spreadsheet where you are consistently tracking, your metrics, your outcomes, and your completed projects. Because to Kenya's point earlier, managers don't always remember. So it's not in your best interest, and you want to make sure that you're capturing a good story to tell. And remember, the goal here isn't about perfection. It's just being consistent, right? Whether you set yourself an appointment maybe once every 2 weeks to take a look back, track some progress for a couple of minutes, just maintaining that consistency. Um, and then, just remembering that accomplishments are not just reduced to big numbers or completed projects. You can also talk about personal challenges that you've overcome, skills that you have strengthened, ways that you have supported the team and the culture, and times that you took, initiative and trying to push yourself forward. So,
I like that. Elisa, any insights?
Definitely. So I'll share with you what I kind of do, just because I'm extra like that. I have a folder on my desktop called just a wins folder. So anytime anybody, messages me, oh, you did this and it was so great, or thank you so much for XYZ, I literally screenshot it and drop it in there. It doesn't have to be, pretty. You can kind of curate it later. But anytime, you get a nice email, maybe a Google review, something like that, that's really, it shows your impact. Screenshot it, drop it in there. Anytime you completed a project, you improved a KPI, a shout out, anything like that, screenshot it, drop it in there. And you'll be kind of shocked at how much you can forget if you don't capture it. Um, and once you start to curate that folder, I like to use, they call it the CAR method. So context, action, results. It'll make your accomplishments sound clean, polished, and ready for the manager to hear. So that's what I like to do.
Ooh, I just typed it in the chat really quickly so people don't forget those three keywords. I like that. And this question is directed to Andrea and Kenya. What are some effective ways to bring up career advancement or compensation? This is a good question without feeling awkward or confrontational. Andrea, we'll let you have it first, and then we'll give Kenya the space.
Thank you so much. First, I want to say, as people of color, I think advocacy for us looks different, and especially in today's climate, it can seem very hard to advocate for yourself. But being humble, still remaining confident and just knowing your worth, I think, is the most important. Knowing that the work that you do is a value to the organization. Frame your conversation around value and alignment, not like emotion. Start with, I always tell people, start with curiosity and collaboration. For example, I just had a conversation with someone recently. So it's like, I'd like to explore how my current contributions align with opportunities for greater responsibility or compensation. You can also, add in based on, these goals or these things that I've accomplished, and bring your wins log or your journal that you've kind of jotted down all of the things you've done for that year. And just go into that meeting with confidence, knowing that your worth is something of value to the organization. If you're discussing compensation, come prepared with facts. So, like I said, what did you do for that quarter? Any data you may have, any specific outcomes you may have for specific projects or member service. And when you root yourself, I think um, in a space where you have facts that, show your work behind you, you'll demonstrate your self-worthiness, your self-awareness, your professionalism. It's not entitlement, it's just showing your worth at work is my take on it.
I like that. I like those tips. Kenya?
Andrea, I'm so glad you went before me because mine is going to be an answer that I'll just say it very raw, okay? And for our participants, know that this is my personal opinion. This is not statistically proven, okay? But what I love that Andrea said is don't come in with emotions. And I feel that we as Latino professionals tend to see our work as very personal. And there's nothing wrong with that. We get to talk to our own community. We get to be the one to say, yes, we're going to give you an auto loan. Yes, we'll be able to help you with this. And it's a very emotional transaction from the moment you get there to the moment you leave. It's very taxing. When you're having a conversation about your compensation and maybe a promotion, you have to leave those emotions out the door. As soon as you close the door and you're going to have a conversation with your manager, and the reason is because emotions can be challenged. If you go into a conversation and say, I feel I deserve X, Y, and Z, or I feel undervalued, which is why I need to be making more, that is your opinion, right? So going back to Andrea's point, you have to come with facts. And I think, Alyssa, you said context, actions, results. That is the perfect formula to have those conversations. And I say this because when I was younger in my career, I definitely led with my emotions. I found out that there was a pay gap between myself and a peer who happened to be white. I think there was a $20,000 pay gap between us. And when you experience that, it just, I cried about it. I was very sad. I thought that my manager was my friend. Key point there. I thought the people that I was working with were my friends, and you can have great relationships with them, but always remember that when we go to work, it's a transaction. We do something for the company, and then the company compensates us back. And so, Andrea's recipe on how to manage that conversation is great. I just want to emphasize, make sure you're coming in with facts, make sure you're coming in with the results, and make sure you practice with somebody else so that they can call you. You're leading the argument with emotions, not facts. So that's my answer.
I like that. As someone who struggles with that, I will take all those recommendations myself. We have some questions in the chat that I would love to address. How would you recommend handling or responding when a manager responds that a promotion or compensation increase is not possible? I'm gonna let you guys think for like one moment, and then you can unmute yourself if you want to go first, and I'll let you all answer that question because I think that's an important question to be answered by all of you.
I can take a quick stab at it. I think compensation and pay are not the only things that can be negotiated. So if I was in your place, and I have been in your place in the past, I have always used that as an opportunity to see if I can get the company to sponsor me to get a certificate or to try to get another educational tool added to my resume. Quite frankly, I've just used that to advance in my career, either at that company or at another credit union. But I do think that when you are meet with a no, see if you can turn that into a personal development opportunity for you to add to your school tool set.
I like that.
I can kind of chime in because we're going through this a little bit, I think, across the board when people come to HR and ask for that compensation raise, and we're on budget restrictions, and so the hard no comes in. I definitely agree with all things that Kenya said. I am a strong advocate for educational tuition that we offer. I use it twice a year. If you looked on my LinkedIn, I am certified in quite a bit of things. I tell people, whatever organization you go to, never leave money on the table. So if your organization offers tuition assistance, and it's a hefty amount where you can better yourself or further yourself, use this time to learn what you can learn and use that professional development, like Kenya said, and find your next open door or your next chapter.
I love that. Not leaving money on the table. That is a good one.
Someone
I'm gonna
told me
type that
that
one
a
in the
lot.
chat.
Yeah, someone told me that a long time ago, and I take it I take it with me. We never go into jobs thinking that we have to like document ourselves, right? Or write down everything we do or but I think in today's climate, especially people of color, like those are the things like we have to do and we have to show our work. And you have to be prideful of it. I hate social media, just so everyone knows. And so, but my friends are always like, you should influence, you should this. So I'm trying more to like showcase my praises on LinkedIn and things I'm most proud of, especially like being a part of this panel, being with all of you amazing people and being able for you to hear my opinion and my voice. Like to me, this is what fills my cup and what makes me most proud. So just hang in there and just document what you're doing and celebrate your wins.
No, well, we're so honored to have you here, Andrea. Alisa, do you want to add anything to the first question and because there's more in the chat. I told you guys, our audience is engaged.
Yes, so directed towards Catherine's question and Andrea, I love do not leave money on the table. Yes, and heavy on the documentation as an HR professional. If you know, you know. But I would definitely, if you're met with that no, um, I would ask the manager, what can I do to be ready for the opportunity once it becomes a yes or a possible yes? So going back to Andreas, any certifications that you might be able to do, any job shadowing. And I'm kind of an advocate of asking your manager, like, okay, well, then give me a career development path to get there because that shifts the responsibility onto the manager, which really they should have. I always say managers manage people um, and do operations. You know what I mean? So I really believe that a manager's main focus should be to manage and grow and develop their people. Um, so that would be my piece of advice for that. Ask them, if not now, what can I do to be ready later?
Mm. Thank you for that reminder, Lisa, for all the managers on the call to continue developing their folks. George, anything to add?
Not anything meaningful. I think you guys added a lot of very, very good viewpoints. Yeah, shifting that conversation to your manager definitely helps. I mean, and if you're gonna approach this conversation, do it with the mindset that a no might be the response that you get, but a no is not a permanent thing, right? That's the in the now. That way, going back to our emotional responses earlier in the conversation, it's not something that you take perhaps defensively, but flipping that conversation and really getting a clear understanding from your direct manager on what it's going to take for you to arrive at that increase if you're not already there and getting a clear definition of that. So great
Mhm.
job to the panel on answering that.
Thank you, George. We have a question directed to Kenya. Kenya, and I think this was from your earlier points. How to formulate the initial approach statement? I don't know if Anne Sanchez wants. Do you get the
Yeah.
gist of this?
Yeah. So I would say, let's say I was a lender. I would like to move up to the next level of the next title of a lender. So I would start that approach is, I think verbatim would be in the last year, I have doubled my lending goals. I've brought on board 100 new more members to the credit union, and I would like to explore what does that look like in regards of advancement for my career. I would like to be challenged and be able to move from a consultant to an executive, maybe a member service executive role, and possibly just continue to challenge myself to continue to add value to the organization. So that's my answer on the spot. Notice that I never said I am overworked and I'm not getting compensated as an executive in an executive type of role. I feel like I've done a lot for the credit union without really providing much context. And so it's really all about practicing. Anytime that I have a conversation about my own personal career advancements, I always practice with somebody that doesn't work at the institution. And so that could be somebody, that if you're a member of NELCA, you reach out to Naibi and Barbara and say, hey, can you find me somebody that I can practice with? and they will get you somebody to do that. Because I think sometimes it's better to do that with people that don't know you, because they're going to be able to give you constructive and honest feedback versus practicing with a friend who might be like, oh, yeah, you're fine, you're ready to go. But the approach for me is always relating it back to what have you done in the last 12 months, 6 months, and going from there and saying you're ready to be challenged, you're ready to take on the next role. And knowing that you already articulated what you can do and what you will do in the next position.
Mm-hmm. I think you can, yeah. And I think this goes back to like what everybody else has stated about documenting your success throughout the year, because then you'll have actual facts that you can go to your review with, and then you don't have to talk about feelings because you have them right in front of you, and the things that you have done. We do have another question. How do you approach your boss when you were promoted to a management role versus an executive role, but you are performing the same exact duties? Who wants to take a stab at it? George, we'll let you go, and and then we can pass it around.
Yeah, no, thank you. So just so I make sure I'm understanding the conversation, if I'm an employee and my perception is, hey, I was just promoted to a manager, right? But I'm doing the same thing that my boss is doing, so I should have been promoted one step higher.
Mm-hmm.
I think first and foremost, before accepting any promotion, it's clear to get a picture of what your job description is entailing, and that way you have a sense of what you're signing up for, right? Um, and if you are in fact sharing some of those responsibilities, I think that is something that can be easily perceived. So what I mean by that is, if I'm not in constant communication with the person above me, I don't have a direct line of sight of what their responsibilities is, because my perception might be they're handling strategic, type of items that I don't have a direct line of sight into. And so my perception is like, hey, well, I'm doing your job. What is it that you're doing? But ultimately, and I go back to the emotional aspect on this, you want to take responsibility of the role that you've been given if you're transitioning into a new role, and you want to look to see where you're going to perform, where you're going to propel yourself forward, and make sure again that you're documenting so that you can have this clear communication. But I mean, if you feel like you're at a point where you do need to have some clearly defined delineation between roles, don't be afraid to have that conversation with your direct manager, respectfully, of course. So you don't paint yourself in a bad light. But yeah, I mean, those are very valid conversations to have with your manager so that you can identify exactly what their role entails and what they're expecting of you in your newly acquired role. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else want to take a stab at this question?
I can take a little stab
Yeah.
at it. Um, I think for me, when you're doing the same role, so here's my thing. Does that executive role exist already in the organization? If it does, can you take that job description, your job description, and compare the differences or things that you can implement already and then effectively possibly go in there and either get a title change or a compensation change for what you're doing. Um, I'm currently kind of in the process of realigning my job title. So that would be my go-to is, does that job exist? And are there pieces or key components that, yes, you are doing what looks like probably the full job description or duties of the executive, but are there little snippets missing that you can pepper in, so to speak?
Mm, yeah, yeah. Elisa, I think you were unmuting.
Yes. So kind of going off of Andrea's point, something that I advise employees to do sometimes is to go into other institutions that are maybe similar in size, similar in assets, similar location, and see if they have a job description for that role posted. Take that job description and compare it to your own. And then take a look at the compensation and say, well, this is what they're compensating this role that's very similar to mine in another institution. Is there a way that we can get there? And also use, like Kenny and Andrea have said, those kind of negotiation tactics, right? So, what can I do to get there? What does a transition to CFO look like? Is there a timeline for that? And these questions can feel a little bit intimidating to ask, but you're honestly well within your right to do so. You deserve clarity in your work, and you deserve to be compensated for the role that you are doing.
Mhm. I like that you mentioned clarity because that you can approach it with that angle too. Like, I just want clarity about, the questions that you're asking, Noemi. So, Kenya, do you have any advice here? She also said that the role does not exist currently. Is if I believe so. So, Kenya, maybe you can offer some insight to that.
No, I think everything that I would have said was already said.
Yeah, okay, awesome. Thank you. Um, um, And Noemi, I don't know if you were a little bit later, just to remind everybody, we will have breakout rooms to where you can get into the nitty-gritty of these things. So that would be a great space to use to continue this conversation specifically. So I really encourage everyone to please have questions for our panelists in the breakout sessions because I think you can receive a lot of constructive feedback there as well. So the next question I have for you guys is, let me find my place. Oh, how can professionals approach constructive feedback without taking it personally and instead use it to propel their growth? And this question is for George and Andrea. Andrea, do you want to take it first and then we'll pass it over
Yeah,
to
good question. So in my younger years, I did used to take feedback personal. I thought it was a personal attack on me, my work ethic, how I showed up in the workplace. And now that I have grown and learned a lot of things, it's really just feedback on how you show up in the workplace, how you're working, how can you make things better? And I think if no one, let's say you're doing a horrible job and you're rude to members or you're rude to your peers, but no one ever told you. And let's say you don't even know you're being rude. That's just how you communicate normally. Without that feedback, there would be no change. Maybe once someone said, "Hey, you're rude to members, like they don't want to come back," and you make that change and you see a substantial growth in, loans or accounts that you open. I think that constructive feedback is critical within the workplace. I think a good manager should be able to give you that feedback as a leader. And when you're in a role and you get no feedback whatsoever, it makes it so hard to develop and know what you need to work on, as a person trying to move forward. Because at the goal, like we all want to move forward. I tell people I'm Pinky in the brain. I'm trying to figure out how to take over the world at all times of the day. And I think
you.
most of you on this call are probably the same. So feedback is key. So don't take it as a personal vendetta on yourself.
I love that. George?
Andrea, I think you touched on some really good points. I think the only thing I could add as a recipient of feedback, right? I would say probably the first rule is receiving it as data, not a diagnosis. It's not who you are. Feedback simply reflects, how your work is being perceived. So make sure that you separate your identity from your performance. That way you kind of put yourself in a headspace where you're receiving information without feeling attacked. Um, as you're receiving feedback, because as managers, it's very easy to deliver feedback imperfectly, right? We're humans, we make mistakes. But as a receiver of feedback, you want to make sure that as imperfectly as it may be delivered, you're listening for the themes, right? They may not be saying it the right way, but there may be some truth to the way that to the information that they're giving you. Clarifying questions are great. When you're having that conversation, ask for examples. Ask, what would success look like for next time if I am not performing up to par? Um, Make sure that when you are receiving feedback, right? As Latinos, we tend to have nos prenden un cohete and we're quick to react. So, you want to make sure that you pause before reacting if you already know yourself to be that way. Emotional responses are normal, but they're not gonna allow you to provide something that gives you validity. And at the end of the day, I mean, own what's yours. If they're giving you feedback and you're like, you know what, yeah, that's me. That's me, and I probably need to make some pivots here. I need to make some adjustments. Own it and leave on the table what's not yours. Not all feedback is accurate. And so you want to go ahead and evaluate against your own goals, your own values. And I guess the final thought is just making sure that you understand that growth is rarely going to happen in comfort, right? So if they're giving you something that you're like, man, this doesn't make me feel good, this is making me feel really uncomfortable. Just make sure that you know that constructive feedback is going to highlight, the areas that you need to perform well. And if you can be in the headspace to strengthen it, it's going to let you make pivots. It's going to let you make adjustments, and it's going to hopefully put you in a situation where you're elevating your career and moving ahead in the quickest way possible. So,
Love all of that advice, George.
Can I
And
just
that's
piggyback
something,
real
yeah.
quick, Barbara? Can I just say off of George what he said? Just so you all, growth is very uncomfortable. When you are uncomfortable, you are getting ready to have the growth of a lifetime, most likely. So get uncomfortable, get familiar with being uncomfortable, and it is okay. Make uncomfortable be your happy place when it comes to your career.
I like that. Kenya and Elisa, it's kind of piggybacking from this question, and I'm excited for this one. What's your advice for employees who receive vague or minimal feedback during their reviews, and how can they ask for clarity or next steps? Elisa, you can go first, and then we'll pass it over to Kenya.
Awesome, thank you. So I think a key is and I know it's super frustrating. I've been there. I think we've all dealt with super vague feedback, but it's not the end of the conversation. Think of it as your starting point to clarity. So if someone tells you something like, I don't know, you need to be more proactive. It's like, okay, what does that look like? Or, thank you for the feedback. Could you share a specific example so that I can apply it right away? Um, you can also ask things like, what would being more proactive look like in the next 30 days? And that kind of shifts, again, the responsibility of answering that question back onto the appraiser to give specific examples because feedback should be specific and be tied to an action that you can improve on or change. Um, Another thing that I'm really big on is behavioral definitions. So words like leadership, words like ownership, those can mean completely different things depending on the manager. And you deserve clarity, of course. So if the manager can't remember examples, and as we've all said, that genuinely happens sometimes because managers are human. This is where your documentation can really help. So you can say something like, here are some examples of what I did this year, and can you share how these align or don't align with your expectations? And my biggest tip to you as an HR professional is to always, always, always send a quick follow-up email summarizing everything that you talked about, capturing any commitments that you made, summarizing your understanding. It's not only helpful for clarity, but it also protects you and ensures the alignment going forward. That way, goalposts aren't being moved and nothing isn't captured in the conversation.
I love documentation and what you're saying, Elisa, there to document your conversation after an annual review. That's something that I should apply as well. Kenya?
I agree with 100% everything that Alyssa just mentioned. The only item that I would add is that there will come a time where your manager is just really conflict avoidant and they might see giving you feedback as conflict, which is not, but just being very candid about, I've had a manager, I think we worked together probably for almost 4 years, could never get them to give me feedback. I don't know if they were afraid of me because I am a Scorpio, but I would ask and I would come ready with those questions and they just could not do it. And I knew I'm very hyper self-aware of the times that I've made mistakes or I could have done things differently. And so after trying to get them to give me something, I opted out by going to their peers or maybe the folks that I was working very close with to say, hey, I just want to level set. Do you mind giving me some feedback and the way that you've have you witnessed my work or the way that we've worked together, and that the possibility of you getting feedback, constructive feedback from peers, other leaders, would probably be best if you find yourself in that worst case scenario where your manager just does not know how to provide that feedback too. So just wanted to add that there.
Thank you, Kenya. Kenya, I'll go ahead and stay with you for the next question as well, and then we'll pass it over to Andrea. What do you look for when evaluating employees' performance and readiness for advancement as a manager?
Okay, as a manager, I'll focus on just the one main thing, and it could be just very personal to me. I look for an employee who's able to problem solve. So, an employee, I'm not asking for them to drown in this little island by themselves, but an employee that is able to see an issue, solve the issue, and come to me with the results of the decisions that they've made. So, that to me is an indicator that that person is ready to advance in their career, is able to take on more challenges and more opportunities. When I have an employee that still needs a lot of guidance, still needs, for a lack of a better word, hand holding. That to me is a person that is not there yet. And if you are in that state where you feel maybe you haven't built your confidence yet, or you're still asking for a lot of guidance, I go back to, is there a leadership institute that you can join? Is there maybe like a one-time class that you can join to get that problem-solving skills experience there? So for me, when I'm looking at my direct reports, I'm assessing them in how confident do they feel in their job? How confident do they feel in making decisions? And I don't want to just put it on the employees themselves, because it's really your manager's job to also help you build that confidence, build that trust in your role. But for me, I'm looking for those problem-solving skills, so that I don't have to be in the room to be able to help them get us to the next phase.
Andrea?
Yeah. I love a good problem solver, just to piggyback off of Kenya, because I feel like that is what I do most of the time. But for me, I think some key factors I look for is impact. Like how has the employee's work moved through the business or moved the business forward? What measurable outcomes have they influenced either within the department or the organization as a whole? And consistency, like do they deliver, consistent reliability within their workflow, not just when things are easy, but when circumstances get challenged. Like, are they showing that consistency? And then culture contribution. I am a big advocate for culture contribution. In my fairy tale world, I want all of us to come to work and be happy and have fun with one another, because we are with our coworkers 8 hours or more out of the day, but that doesn't necessarily happen. So just embodying that culture contribution is important for me, and valuing those core values within the organization.
I love your fairy tale world, because I
It
think
is. I'm in a fairy tale world.
Yes, we all want our employees to get along with one another and, contribute. But George and Elisa, we have a next question for you guys. What impresses you the most during a review conversation, and what signals readiness for new opportunities? George, and then we'll pass it over.
Yeah, so I think what impresses me the most are a couple of things, right? One of them, a big piece of it is probably self-awareness, because that signals to me as a manager that, this person is coming in, and on a 1 to 5 scale, they're not rating themselves all fives and walking on water, so to speak, right? So if they're humble enough to give themselves, a 3 or a 3.5, that'll kind of make me dive a little bit deeper into that. And then initiative is always great as well, right? And so when an employee can come to you and they can talk about what they've accomplished, the things that they've learned, honestly talk to you about where they've struggled, what they want next, and maybe what they even need from you and from the organization. they're communicating to their manager, they're showing maturity, they're showing ownership, and all of that is tied together with professional confidence. So all good things to include in that conversation. As employees, you want to make sure that you're coming prepared with reflections, with future ideas, and not just kind of sitting back and waiting for the manager to lead that conversation. Because again, you have the best vested interest in telling your own story and bringing up that documentation of the things that you've done. So definitely want to second the motion on the problem solving. You want to see somebody that's curious, somebody that asks how things work. They want to see context rather than just doing the bare minimum. Somebody that's consistent, somebody that's reliable, and somebody that has that growth-oriented mindset. And maybe they're even, exhibiting a little bit of leadership behaviors, even without the title. They're, supporting others, they're supporting their team, they're sharing knowledge, they're, elevating the team culture, I believe, as Andrea mentioned earlier. So just, some small takeaways in that regard.
Thank you. Alisa?
I absolutely agree with everything that George said. I mean, he hit the nail on the head for everything. As you know, director of HR, I am involved in promotion conversations quite often. And I can tell you almost every single promotion conversation I've ever been included in or been a part of includes the line, they're already acting like they're in the role. So it's almost like your title is just catching up. Um, so a tip I would share is if you want that advancement, start showing up like the role that you want and not just the role that you have. Um, and I know that can get into, well, why am I doing extra work if I'm not being compensated for it? So that's a fine line to juggle. But definitely exhibiting those behaviors that George mentioned, like that leadership initiative, that curiosity. A really big thing for me is resourcefulness. I can't tell you how many times I have had, people just in my life, not even necessarily employees, ask me something and expect me to solve it for them. And I'm like, Google is free. You could have Googled that and gotten the answer. Um, so my one of my sisters is a preschool teacher, and she will say, ask three before you ask me. So that's resourcefulness is a trait I very much value and like to see in employees, kind of tying into problem solving and initiative. Those are really big ones for me.
I like that. We have the last and final question before we break out into groups. So Andrea and Elisa, research shows that BIPOC professionals often face biases and performance evaluations. What steps can both employees and organizations take to ensure fairness and equity in the review process? Andrea, we can go with you and then we'll piggyback to Elisa.
Yeah. I think bias tends to thrive in areas of subjectivity, so which means both employees and organizations share responsibility for ensuring that fairness, right? So for the employee side, um, you know, keep tangible evidence, like we've mentioned, documentation, performance, your metrics, any feedback you've gotten, emails, measurable outcomes are all key. Use your self-evaluation as a storytelling. You are the storyteller of your own journey. So use those tools to shape your journey, shape your narrative clearly, and confidently. Have that confidence. And then I think another thing is probably um, seek feedback throughout the year. So create that visibility, reduce surprises when that review session does come up. No one likes a surprise. And I think for leaders within the organization, like using structured evaluation rubrics, helping that focus and, making sure that you're giving that feedback to your team because they want to know like how can they advance and kind of show up differently within their role and provide bias awareness if I know a lot of organizations have it or trying to implement it, so providing that bias awareness and equitable feedback training for leaders I think is key because some leaders need that in today's climate. So those would be my takeaway. Oh, and psychological safety. I would say build in psychological safety and accountability for employees. It is It helps employees just be empowered and know that they are in that safe space to have these conversations.
Mhm. I love that. Anissa?
So I absolutely agree with the psychological safety piece, and I think a lot of it comes down to culture, right? The culture within an organization. And unfortunately, I think some organizations just don't have it, and they will not get there until key leadership roles change. So I think that, sometimes we're in a position where we need, we need the job, we need money, but to not let that affect your own perception of yourself and your own self-worth. I definitely think that training leaders on the subtle biases that will show up in performance reviews is extremely important. There are so many well-researched types of bias, proximity bias, affinity bias, there's cultural taxation, and all of these show up in reviews, unfortunately. Um, I absolutely agree with what Andrea said about bias sort of thriving in subjectivity. So I think standardizing criteria for organizations, the criteria that employees are evaluated on in organizations is extremely important because when expectations are vague, the bias fills those gaps.
Mm.
So if I had any advice for employees, it would be to require like evidence and hard numbers. If someone says, "Oh, you don't have a great attitude," that's a judgment. That's a feeling. Now, if they said, your loan fundings came down by XYZ%, okay, how can I improve that? How can I move forward?
Mhm. I love that. Well, that concludes all the questions we have together, but technology is not always our friend, so we're gonna break you guys out. Be patient with us. That's not our forte here at NOCA, but we're gonna break you all out, and I wanna let the participants know the breakout rooms are not being recorded. So I know the folks on this call, the panelists are safe spaces for you all to have those nitty-gritty conversations with them, and we hope it's engaging. We're going to give you guys about 15 to 20 minutes. We'll go around and see if people need more time. We'll be happy to do so, but we do cap it at it'll be 2:30 North Carolina Eastern time. So you have until 2:30 to connect with all these folks. But we'll hope that you enjoy it, and we'll meet back up here as a group.